words than those on the cover of your bulletin. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. Hope is a feathered thing. It can be blown by the wind, rustled, tossed, lifted. It can seem to fly away, but it can also hover, approach, be close without landing, draw you to follow it with the plumage. On the second Sunday in Advent, the Sunday of Hope, we listen for the tune that doesn't have words and yet which is all songs, ballads, laments, marches, everything that ever made us take another step on a dark day. Hope. The tune without the words that never stops at all. And now, Sophia Monk O'Leary will light the candle of hope. Here we join with our choir to sing in response with the great old Yuletide command to deck the halls with boughs of holly. That'll be number 235 in your hymn book, unless you know it by heart, which I'm sure some of you do. Shall we sing it together? This portion we call Common Learning from the Learning Commons is to remind us that we are ever students, always learning, always acquiring deeper insight. And often that means looking at the same thing over and over because we find new things in the familiar. In this case, being the Sunday devoted to hope, I read from an editorial penned over 100 years ago in response to a letter. Dear editor, I'm 8 years old. Some of my friends say there is no Santa Claus. Papa says if you see it in the sun, it is so. Please tell me the truth. Is there a Santa Claus? Signed, Virginia O'Hanlon of West 94th Street, New York, New York. Virginia, your little friends are wrong. They have been affected by the skepticism of a skeptical age. They do not believe except they see. They think that nothing can be which is not comprehensible by their little minds. All minds, Virginia, whether they be men's or children's, are little. In this great universe of ours, we are but a mere insect, an ant in our intellect as compared with the boundless world about us, as measured by the intelligence capable of grasping the whole of truth and knowledge. Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. He exists as certainly as love and generosity and devotion exist, and you know that these abound and give to your life its highest beauty and joy. Alas, how dreary would the world be if there were no Santa Claus? It would be as dreary as if there were no Virginias. There would be no childlike faith, no poetry, no romance to make tolerable this existence. We should have no enjoyment except in sense and sight. The eternal light with which childhood fills the world would be extinguished. Not believe in Santa Claus? You might as well not believe in fairies. You might get your papa to hire men to watch all the chimneys on Christmas Eve to catch Santa Claus. But even if they did not see Santa Claus coming down, what would that prove? Nobody sees Santa Claus, but that is no sign that there is no Santa Claus. The most real things in the world are those that neither children nor adults can see. No Santa Claus. Thank God he lives and lives forever. 1,000 years from now, Virginia, nay, 10,000 times 10,000 years from now, he will continue to make glad the heart of childhood. Francis P. Church, editor, New York Sun, September 21st, 1897. Are your hearts warmed now? So I have an easy passage into your pocket, I assume. Our offering this week, it says, is dedicated to the Fountain Street Church Fountain Club service trip. Fountain Club, if you do not know, is where our young people, those in high school, start trying on adulthood. And they have a lot of room. And one of the things they do is they organize a trip to serve others someplace away from Grand Rapids, where they have to be strangers in a strange land, where they have to learn everything. They cannot depend upon almost anything. They're going to Washington, D.C. next summer, and I've been in Washington, D.C. in the summer. This is not an easy passage. Heat and humidity will be their friends, I guarantee. And they will be there to serve those in that city as well as to learn. They want you to help. Half of our offering every week goes to serve something beyond this moment, this room, we grown-ups. And in this Sunday, second Sunday of hope, I hope, you will help them move closer to adulthood by helping their trip give them the experience that will broaden their minds and deepen their hearts. With that in mind, I invite you now to give generously to our offering as our choir gives generously of theirs. Honesty is in these days because it's not in places where it ought to be. I'll just leave that right there. And tell you right now, I don't think this will be as good and polished a message as I had hoped because, well, I gave in to a whim and went to the movies yesterday. I went to the movie theater yesterday because they were rebroadcasting the abridged Metropolitan Opera version of the Magic Flute, and even a little magic flute is better than no magic flute. And so I spent the afternoon in the theater, whistling, singing, clapping to something that's a year old. That's what happens when it's really impressive. You still applaud, don't you? But I'm not going to talk about the opera, though I love it. I'll save a comment later. But I want you to know, if you don't think this was as good as it could have been, blame Mozart. The mystery of hope. For those of you who may not know, this church has devoted the 4 Sundays in Advent to faith, hope, and love and joy, which you will see in the next 2 weeks. We've been doing this for over half a century. We may not have a creed, we have no confession, no sacraments, but dissenting from this is what would be heresy at Fountain Street Church. But that makes it difficult year in and year out to say something new. You know what's coming. And we want to say something new, we preachers. You may also know that I'm devoting my messages this season to how music has been my personal scripture. And last week I told you that what came to mind for Advent was a motet I learned years ago as a conductor by Francis Poulenc to a text, O Magnum Mysterium, which you just heard again because it's a Catholic devotional text that's been set many times. And you'll hear several of them this Advent. Now, for those of you for whom Latin is still a foreign language, O Magnum Mysterium is O Great Mystery, and tells of the mystery of the Nativity, not the theology, but that all these animals are gathered round. It was meaningful. The words are old, but the sensation is ever new. And so I spoke last week on the mystery of faith, and this week it is the mystery of hope, and next week it will be the mystery of love and joy. But in some ways, hope is the most mysterious of all. For if you look at reality clearly, we are a species not that far from what Thomas Hobbes described back in 1651 when he summarized human life as largely solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. Chuckle if you will, but for most of humanity that is not altogether inaccurate. We are the fortunate. For millions, if not billions, tomorrow's dinner is not certain. Next week's shelter is not certain. Disease is close, not far. And suffering is to be expected. They have little reason to hope, and not more than a century ago, most of us would be more similar to that than not. We are the lucky ones who have enough to eat and a place to live. We do not have to think about where we will be tomorrow or the next day, at least most of us. Be not deceived. Even some of us live on the edge. But all of us, each and every one of us, with our homes and our larders, our jobs, our adequate resources, will one day face the reality of illness, disability, and death. That's built in. Let's face it, rationally, hope makes no sense whatsoever. And that's the mystery. Why do we hope in a world where it's obvious there isn't any reason to? Now, last Sunday I did not mention, being a busy day, that December the 1st is World AIDS Day. I want to go back to that for this very reason. AIDS erupted almost 40 years ago now. Just consider that. And if you remember, and many of you do, the panic was visceral. It was mysterious, deadly, and like diseases of ancient times, attributed to sin. We know now that it is not always deadly, that it has nothing to do with sin, though many still suffer from it. And I mention that because back in the early 1990s, before we knew where it came from or how well to treat it, when lots of people were still dying of it, I served a church with members who had it and performed more than one funeral for those who succumbed to it. And not only that, I visited those who suffered in hospitals and nursing homes. I saw those who looked more like concentration camp victims than human beings, their eyes sunken, their faces pallid, their eyes void of hope, which is why I mention it. They knew what was coming. They were doomed, and everyone knew it. And I mention this because someone studied the hopefulness of AIDS victims and discovered something unusual. That while many of those who had it did in fact lose all hope, there were some who did not, notwithstanding the lack of medicine, the uncertainty of the future. And it turned out most of those who were determined they were going to outlive it were poor people, black people, brown people. They did further study and determined that these were people, as you might not be surprised, who already had very little and for whom hope was often the only thing they could make tomorrow work with. They were good at hoping because they were unable to rationally expect much from the rest of life. We who are fortunate, and I mean we, those who are fortunate, if you are not among the fortunate, I honor you. We live on expectations. We have reason to expect that we will be here tomorrow, that food will be on the table, the house will be heated, there will be a house, that our clothes will be present, that our bodies will not be ravaged by illness. The poor, though, and the marginalized, they live on hope. They know it's remote. So the mystery of hope, for me at least, begins with the paradox that those who have the most reason to be hopeless are often the most hopeful of all. Like the fable of Pandora, who opened the box that let all the evils out, and all that was left in was hope. If that's all you have, you shut that box and you keep it tight, because that's all you have. The mystery of hope is that the hopeless are the most hopeful. Let's move on. This week was also another anniversary, December 5th. That was the day in 1955 when Rosa Parks didn't stand up. You know the basics. She got on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, and refused to move to the back. She got arrested, and the African American community rallied round her in a boycott of all buses for over a year. Some of them walking 2 and 3 miles each way to work. Famous quotation from that is when someone asked an older black woman if she was tired. She said, "My feet is tired, but my heart is rested." Here was a people who for a century had been living under literally a war of terror called Jim Crow. And I say a literal war of terror because in that city now is the National Memorial of Peace and Justice, which honors, notes, and lifts up literally the 4,400 known victims of lynching in the United States. Known, let me emphasize that. So imagine living in a world where you had to get off the curb if a white person came to you. If you spoke without saying sir or ma'am, you could and were subject to violence, arbitrary, brutal, and deadly. Emmett Till said hello to a white woman in a store. She thought he was uppity, and the Ku Klux Klan demolished him the next day. And no one paid for the crime. If you lived in that world, what reasonable hope would you have that tomorrow could be better? None. And yet, between the time of Emmett Till to the assassination, sadly, of Dr. King, Jim Crow vanished. Not that we're done, even remotely. But it vanished because the people who had no reason to hope walked every day for a year, walked from place to place, showed up, turned up, bore and endured further suffering than they had before. Suffering akin to the afflictions laid upon the children of Israel when they dared to ask for their freedom. And the impossible became impossible. Two examples of the mystery of hope. Hope always belongs to the hopeless, and it's always beyond reason. It's not irrational, mind you, but more than the situation would justify looking for. And sometimes it is unwise. I'll be honest, we all know that poor people don't always make sound decisions. They do, in fact, buy more tickets for lotteries than any other segment of the population. And they get criticized for being foolish for doing so. But if your prospects of getting a good job feel as remote to you as winning the lottery, $1 on a lottery is money as well spent as hoping to get a job you know you will not get. You see where I'm coming from? Hope looks beyond the immediate, the proximal, the likely, and the prudent. Because if you live in that world, the proximal and the prudent is nothing worth looking forward to. Hope bets on the long odds. Hope swings for the fences whenever the pitch comes toward them. And guess what? That is what religion has been doing forever. Let's take a few stories we overlook from time to time. A man hears a voice that says, I will make your offspring a nation with as many as there are stars in the sky, and up and leaves everything and goes off into the wilderness, and even is willing to slaughter his own son because someone said, I will make a nation out of your offspring. That was a fool's errand, don't you think? A fugitive who killed a man in a moment of passion runs off into the desert, finds himself coming back from the desert saying, Hi, I'm here to liberate you from Pharaoh. Was that not a foolish notion? For him to say it and for them to believe it? And then a country bumpkin goes about the rural parts of the Middle East saying, God is here right now and is about to save you from everything. And people follow him around. Large crowds. Those are just the easy stories out of the Bible. You can find them in Islam and Hinduism and Buddhism because all of them preach an extravagant hope. The first mystery of hope is that those who should be hopeless aren't. The second mystery of hope is that it is always beyond belief. And the third one is we still want one. It was Pascal, the great philosopher, who said that a defined God is a finite God. Well, we could say the same thing about hope. A hope that is within reason isn't hope. That's a plan. And it may or may not come true. But that's not hope. Hope is bigger than that. Further, it's outrageous. And this is where we in the liberal religious community, well, this is where we struggle. Because all those things seem to us unrealistic, irrational, foolish. And we have from time to time thought that those who believe in these extravagant promises were fools themselves, and believe me, they know when they've been looked down upon. Be realistic, we say. But real hope must be unrealistic. Something beyond belief, as it were, and we don't even have a belief to go beyond. Now, last week I told you we commit acts of faith every day. Just getting out of bed, going to work, is an unknown commitment right there. This week I'm saying we need to go beyond that faith to hope as well. And like faith, it starts with something far simpler than a grandiose dream of heaven or paradise or nirvana. Hope at its most elementary level says this matters. Absent all proof or evidence to the contrary. This thing, this life, this existence, it matters. Chief Crowfoot of the Canadian Blackfoot was a wise man. He said some stuff I've always remembered and used from time to time in memorial services. At one point he said, "From nowhere we come, into nowhere we go." That's life. He goes on and he says that life is like a flash of the firefly in the night. It is the breath of a buffalo in the wintertime. It is the little shadow that runs across the grass and loses itself in the sunset. Oh, what images those are. Powerful, evanescent, ephemeral. And life feels like that. I was chatting with a member at the YMCA, which is another place I do my pastoral care. You'd be surprised how often Costco and the YMCA turn out to be offices I do business in. Yeah, I don't put in for the expenses. And the member I was talking to, somewhat older than me, but not vastly, was asked by a grandchild what it's like to be old. And the member said that it happens so quickly. Ain't it the truth? Chief Crowfoot was not lying. We all know. Nasty, brutish, and short. But we know the short part is real. Which is why Pascal comes back to mind again, because he also said, the heart has reasons which reason does not know. Despite the facts, despite the evidence, we believe it all matters. The heart knows what the brain cannot. We make it matter, don't we? Anthropologists once had a name for this thing. They called it homo faber, creative man. I wrap that in quotes because that's not the appropriate word anymore. What makes us human is creating meaning and creating things. Because when we create a thing that didn't exist, we are creating value to us. And I don't mean tools. I mean otters use tools, birds use tools, and they're very smart. Let me understand that. But I do mean it is the cave paintings in Lascaux. There's no purpose for those. But they signify something mattered to them. It is the axes that have symbols or designs carved in them. You don't need to do that to make an axe. It is the weaving that has a pattern. It is the injection of meaning, of value, in which we're expressing our belief that somehow it matters. And it's also the intangible things like words, stories, songs. Everything we make is an act of hope that it all matters. One scholar of religion, Warren, wondered if this was when religion began to take shape, when some ancient person was whacking at an axe to make it and wondered in some antiquated way, I made this, what made me? It's not that far from there to Voltaire, who is reputed to have said, if there were no God, it would be necessary to invent him. He didn't actually say it. In fact, when someone said he did, he says, I don't remember, but I wish I had. But you can see the kinship between them. This wondering if somehow we matter, and the assertion that we do without enough evidence to nail it down. Why do we create? Because it gives meaning. And we wildly hope that something about us matters, no matter how fast the shadow runs across the grass. Every act of creation, from begetting a child to joining a church, is a bet that life matters, that the future will not erase everything. And now I go back to the magic flute. It's a silly opera. The plot makes no sense. It's actually a pretty dumb story. But the music makes it all matter. It gives what my predecessor called dignity, meaning, worth, and joy to what's going on in the story. That's what music does. It adds value to the words. When you heard the Thomas Luis de Victoria, the words, oh my, you didn't, but you heard the music, and it gave it a shape of value, of worthy of your attention. It mattered while it was happening. And there's something deeper yet. Music is the art that gives meaning to time itself. The thing that is erasing us as fast as possible is utterly necessary for the existence of music, because you want to hear the next note and the note after that. And you want to go to the future because that's where the music is going. Music tells us tomorrow is worth going to. That the future has value even before we got to it. The present did in the past. It adds meaning, mattering, to the predictable erosion of our being. And then, when all the silliness has come to an end and it comes to a majestic conclusion that is altogether too pat, the chorus comes on stage, the heroes are crowned, and they sing in German, sadly, but I'll give it to you in English. Strength has triumphed, rewarding beauty and wisdom with an everlasting crown. And for a moment, as the music plays, the violins are tearing along, the woodwinds are making these lovely notes. For that moment, I feel it could be true. For that moment, I am ready to believe with all my heart that that world could come into existence. In fact, that it's already here. The kingdom of God, whatever it is there at that moment, and it can happen again. Of course, that's what Christmas itself does. It's a silly story. It's preposterous. It doesn't even make sense. There are two stories and they don't fit. But here you have this notion that a baby born to a poor family in the middle of nowhere 2,000 years ago changed the world. Did it happen? Reason says, of course not. But my heart wants it to be true, not literally. I want a world where babies are gods and we revere them, where animals are wise and we listen to them. I want a world where the mighty are not so mighty and the poor are precious beyond imagining, where W.H. Auden says, everything is a you and nothing is an it. I want that world. It's beyond reason. It's beyond belief. But that is why I keep on living. why I had children, why I serve you. Reason says there is little chance this could be true. Yeah, but there is a chance, isn't there? I don't know it all. You don't know it all. Maybe there is a chance it could happen. It may be smaller than winning the Mega Millions, but I buy the ticket now and then. It might happen. And it's way smaller than hitting a grand slam off of Justin Verlander. But believe me, if I ever had a bat and he was pitching, I'm going to swing for those fences. I'm not going to let it pass me by. That's hope. It's buying a ticket even though you know you're going to lose. It's swinging even though you know you're going to strike out, because every now and then someone hits it and we get to cheer. That's hope. Well, that's hope as far as I'm concerned. It's not a mystery at all, really. I just do it. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be found true in thy sight, thou who art my rock and my Redeemer. Join me now in a moment of prayer, gratitude, and remembrance as we gather this service together. How hard it is to hope, nameless one. So much tells us we should give it up. Be sensible, be reasonable, don't be foolish. But I need to be foolish. I so need to be foolish in a world of fools who think they are not. Maybe that's the difference. They think they are wise but are fools, and I think I am a fool, and who knows, perhaps I am wise. Wise to be a fool. Because I need to hope that this me, it all matters in some way. I don't know how. I'm not sure that any of the stories really happened or happened the way they're told. But I know when I see a child, something divine is present to my eyes. I know without having to ask my mind that when the spring returns, the grass will dare itself above the ground again. I don't need to know why. I just know it will be so. Help us each here, whatever burden we carry, fear, anger, disappointment, cynicism, whatever sorrow or struggle is in each of our hearts, make hope real in us. Make tomorrow worth attending. There is a light we each have, and its fuel is hope. Let not that guttering flame go out just yet. And let us always take strength from those whose lives we knew in the past, but have completed their journey amongst us, the living. They who in their day were young and hopeful, surrendered life as we all must, and handed onward for us the hope that tomorrow is still worth the effort. I lift up the names of Sally Warren, Gerald Anderson, Carl Green, Rufus Teasdale, Mary Murphy, God filled with mercy, dwelling in the heavens' heights, bring proper rest beneath the wings of your Shekhinah to the souls of our beloved who have gone to their eternal place of rest. May you, who are the source of mercy, shelter them beneath your wings eternally. Bind their souls among the living, that they may rest in peace, that we may be at peace. And let us say, Amen. I invite you now to share in our closing hymn and carol. A brief word about this hymn, among my favorites. Please note the third verse. But with the woes of war and strife the world has suffered long. Beneath the angel strain have rolled 2,000 years of wrong. And we who fight the wars hear not the love song which they bring. Oh, hush the noise of battle strife and hear the angels sing. No general comment this. He wrote it during the Mexican War. It's a protest song. Against war, for peace. Join the angels and sing of peace. I pray we have faith and hope to do the wise planting that generations to come may reap more abundantly than we can imagine. Let us dare to be bold in bringing to fruition the golden dream of liberty and justice and community. This we ask of ourselves, that the fields of promise become fields of truth in days to come, knowing that this and every day is a day which the Lord has made. So whatever the case, let us ever rejoice and be glad in it. Amen and amen.